Just getting confirmation that we are all set. 1 second.
Great, thanks.
Okay, I think we are live now. We're going to get started here in a few, just a minute here momentarily. This is Joe Mauro, Director of Advocacy at the Chamber. And I want to thank all of you for joining us this morning. We received many questions from several of you in advance, and we'll start with those. But if you want to submit a question in the chat, you'll just need to be logged in to your Google or YouTube account. Alternatively, you can email your question to me at jmarro@portlandregion.com. My email's shown there on the screen on the first slide. I'll be monitoring those as they come in. And with that, I will kick it over to our CEO, Quincy Hensel, to get us started. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. That was Joe Mauro. He's our Director of Advocacy at the Chamber, and he has become our resident expert on all things COVID-19. So you will all be hearing from Joe in the coming days and weeks. And I know you already have been hearing from Joe over the last probably 3 weeks now. Congresswoman Pingree, I want to thank you and welcome you this morning. Welcome to my home. And thank you so much for giving us the time today. I know that this is an incredibly stressful and uncertain time for everybody. And for members of Congress, that is no exception. You've been putting in countless hours to really try to figure out the best relief opportunities, both for families as well as for small businesses. For that, we are very, very grateful. I also understand that today's your birthday.
Thank you.
Happy birthday. I'm sure there were other ways you'd like to be spending your birthday today, but we really appreciate you being here with us. So again, on behalf of myself and everyone listening, we'd like to wish you a very happy birthday. And to all of those out there who are tuning in, thank you for joining us. We have about an hour scheduled for this call. The format will be as follows. I'm going to turn it over here shortly to Congresswoman Pingree to give us a high-level overview of some of the relief options that are out there for small business. We would then like to open it up to questions and answers. Joe had mentioned to all of you how to ask questions. We have already gotten so many questions that were submitted prior to this, but there's an opportunity to comment on YouTube, and we will try to get through as many of them as possible. If we do not get through all of them, rest assured we will follow up with all of the attendees with answers to those questions. And I'd also like to direct you to our Chamber Coronavirus Resources page that we literally update daily. And there you'll find some great information, some frequently asked questions, and it could probably help answer some of the questions you might have around these relief efforts after the webinar. And one final note I'd like to mention, we don't expect media joining this call, but I do know we have media who are members of the Chamber. And we just want to note that this is intended to be a conversation that's off the record, and we request that participants who are submitting questions not be identified. So I want to thank you for respecting that request. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Congresswoman Pingree.
Well, thank you so much for allowing me to spend a little time with all of you. Thank you to Quincy and Joe and everyone at the Chamber for setting this up. It's a great opportunity for us to try to see the questions that are out there, what challenges people are dealing with, and also to try to get as much information to all of you as possible. I think we all, understand we're living through unprecedented times, a lot of horrific situations and a lot of huge challenges, particularly to many of you on the phone who are running nonprofits and small businesses and trying to make big decisions, self-employed people. Virtually everybody is caught in a huge challenge now, all at the same time that you're worrying about making sure that your family is safe, that you're taking care of your own health, that the people who are taking care of us are safe. So it really has just presented us with challenges like we've never seen before. I'm particularly proud to represent the state of Maine. I think our administration is doing a great job, and I'm really grateful for the, regular updates that we all get, and the way the Maine CDC is handling this, and the way our hospitals and medical providers are doing it, and just every Mainer who's, staying home and washing their hands and teaching their own kids at school, and, so many challenges, at the same time trying to figure out what to do. So I feel very lucky to have a role to play in this challenging times. And believe me, we are trying to work as fast as we can to find ways to assist you. As you all know, I'm lucky enough to have a staff both here in Washington, and all of them are now directing their efforts to really just constituent service, helping out businesses, helping out any of you. And we're on the phones. We're there for you anytime. And if any of you need to contact me directly, my email is just Chellie@Pingree.com. If you have a question, you can't find the answer, I'll get you to the person who needs to know it. You can also go to our website where we are too, updating every day. We do a newsletter every Friday. So again, we're just trying to get all the information out as fast as we can. But let's talk about the CARES Act, and I'll try to get to the questions as soon as possible. As many of you know, that was the third piece of legislation we passed, and it's kind of unprecedented for Congress to come together as quickly as we did. Clearly, spending $2 trillion is unprecedented in the history of this country in terms of a package like this. And it's a real compromise between Republicans and Democrats. None of us got everything we wanted in this bill. Many of us are deeply concerned that we haven't done enough, but that's for the next round. And right now we're just trying to get the information out about this. We attempted to be as comprehensive as possible about the needs that we anticipated. So I know we'll talk a lot about small business today, and certainly a lot of our questions today are how do businesses and unemployed people stay afloat, but this bill covers a wide range of things. Aid to higher education, aid to K through 12 education, aid that goes directly back to the states, healthcare, hospitals, providers, trying to get more protective equipment, everything you can possibly think of, medical research. We just tried to do the entire scope of things, and particularly important for Maine. There's a package in there that's directed at fishermen. There's a package in there that's directed at farmers. There's one to people who work in the arts and arts-related organizations. So we've tried to target many of the areas where we need extra help, and then we've tried to do everything we can for individuals. As you know, there's money that's being directed to people that will come out either direct deposited, or they'll get a check in the mail. And I know they're working overtime to get that money out as soon as possible. And then we're working as fast as we can on all the other programs. For many of these things, the new SBA loans, the new unemployment insurance, which has been expanded, we're waiting on guidance for the federal government, and I give them credit. I know they're all working overtime through the weekend and just trying to get all these systems up and running. And then here in the state of Maine, same thing, the SBA, the organizations that can assist, the Unemployment Insurance Bureau, they have to upgrade their software systems, train everybody on them, get new people in there. So, there's a lot of challenges out there, but I don't want that to be an excuse. I just want you to all understand that this is an unprecedented amount of money, an unprecedented amount of new programs for the federal government, and everybody's working as hard as they can to get it out. So I'll just quickly, just because I know we're going to probably talk a lot about small business, but as you know, there are, as many of you do know, there are expanded programs at the SBA. Most important is the one that people call the Paycheck Protection Program, which we can get into in more detail. But that really is a forgivable loan. So you apply for the loan as long as the money goes back to keeping people on your payroll or normal business expenses. The loan is forgiven at the end of the period. It's not enough, I'll just say that at the outset, but it could be a big help to some businesses in the beginning. Also, unemployment insurance is greatly expanded. So many people who are self-employed, who are independent contractors, we have 100,000 self-employed people in Maine. They will now be covered. There is an expansion of funding. People get $600 on top of the unemployment compensation they would have been given anyway. And there are very loose guidelines about who is affected. If you're home kids, you have to take care of your kids. If your business is temporarily shut down, if you're sick, if you're required to quarantine, it's just a whole variety of things. So I know there's a lot of questions, and I really appreciate that. I'm going to do my best to answer your questions. You'll see that we are still looking for a lot of information ourselves, but we will get it all to you as quickly as we possibly can, and we'll make sure the chamber has all the latest updates. And I know they're working hard to be updated. So why don't I just stop there and let you go at it?
Great. Thank you so much for that overview. And I know there's a lot to unpack in here, and there's going to be a lot of questions and probably some confusion, but we want to do the best that we can to streamline these relief efforts and the process as to how you can apply for them. So Congresswoman, because you just mentioned the Paycheck Protection Program, which is really, it's an incredible opportunity for businesses, and we encourage them to the extent that they can to take advantage of it. Let's talk a little bit about that. And one of the first questions I have received is, when can they apply? Are applications available now, or is there a date in the near future where that will be offered?
We have heard that the program is going to launch today. Right now, you'll see the application form on the SBA website, so you can get somewhat of an idea of what's in there. And you know, if we're lucky, you'll be able to start applying today, if not Monday. That's for small businesses and sole proprietorships. And then as of April 10th, sorry, I keep looking at papers just to make sure I get the right information. Independent contractors and self-employed will be able to start applying on April 10th. So if we're lucky, it'll be up today. You can already see the application. And then the second round will go out on April 10th. You can ask if you have a relationship with your bank, you can start by talking to them. If you want to consult a SBDC, SCORE, Women's Business Development Centers, they are all ramping up to be of assistance too. And of course, you know, feel free to contact our office, but start with the SBA website. Some of these applications, if you try to apply too early, you might find yourself getting caught in a internet maze or just rejected. Take heart. That doesn't mean that you didn't qualify. It may mean that the program isn't activated yet.
Excellent advice. And one of the best aspects of the Paycheck Protection Program loan is that a portion of it may be forgivable. And there's requirements I know that businesses have to do in order for it to be forgivable. So my understanding is that it's a loan that many people can take out for various uses. But if you want the portion of it to be forgivable, you have to do or maintain certain aspects of your business. Could you talk to that a little bit? I think this is the area where we're getting a lot of questions from our members.
Yes, and it's the area where there's the most confusion, and we have the most hope because we helped to write the legislation, but then in the implementation, we're still waiting to see from the SBA exactly how the definitions and the guidelines are set out. But you're right, it's meant to be a forgivable loan. So you apply for it as if it's a loan. And it's secondly meant to keep people on the payroll. It's a way to disperse more cash through the payroll system, and understanding that many businesses couldn't possibly keep their employees on the payroll right now. There's no money coming through the door, or not enough. As I understand it, the requirements are that you have to have at least 90% of what you had on payroll previously. And that is in numbers. If you had 10 employees, nine want to stay on your payroll, one decided not to. As long as you get one more employee, you're still at 10. If you don't have the full number, I think the forgiveness of the loan is prorated. And I'm telling you a lot of things that I haven't seen all of them in writing. So please, this is just sort of the general understanding. And I also understand it applies for about 8 weeks. Now, I can tell you from the offset, I don't think 8 weeks will be enough to get everyone through this. And you know, we can talk about the idea that we'll probably have another package, or some of these deadlines will be extended. But for the time being, that's where it is. It can also be retroactive, as I understand. So if you still have your employees on the payroll, it can go back to a retroactive date. I'm not exactly sure what that will be. And I also know that if you've laid your employees off, but you bring them back on, you still qualified. So you're not penalized because a week ago you had to make a gut-wrenching decision and say, I can't have employees. So that's just sort of a general way. You're also allowed to use the money for, besides payroll, it says mortgage, interest, rent, utility cost. So kind of standard cost of running your business. The idea is there are limits on what you can pay an employee, which I'm sure is not that's meant for some other business. And you certainly can't spend the money to upgrade your facilities or something else. It's meant to cover operating costs. It only applies to businesses up to 500. So if you have over 500 employees, you don't qualify for this program, but it's supposed to go all the way down to self-employed. So if you are your own employee, we will be getting guidelines about how to handle that.
Are there other relief efforts out there for businesses who are above 500 employees?
Yes, there are, and I'm not sure I can go into great detail. I think one of them is a payroll tax forgiveness program. And I can't remember off the top of my head what the percentage is of that, but there's that. And I think there are a couple other relief programs. There is also about, say $400 billion in this fund. So a massive part of this fund went to the Treasury. That's the part that is considered a potential bailout for the airlines or some of the bigger industries. Those decisions will be made by the Treasury. I don't know how it will impact any of the industries here in Maine, except as they're associated with big companies. That's the one where we attempted to set up a lot of guidelines. So there's transparency. So we all know where that money goes. So there's oversight about how it's given out. And certainly there are conditions. Again, I don't think this will apply to many companies in Maine, but there are conditions, partly because we've learned from other bailouts that you don't want to allow companies to buy back their stock, to pay CEOs exorbitant salaries, to fire their workers, to go bankrupt. There's a lot of conditions in that. Again, most of that won't apply here, but we're anxious to work with any Maine companies that are over that limit to try to figure out how they can access this. But we've been putting an awful lot of our time and attention to the small business provisions because that's what we have a lot of here in Maine.
Great. And so back to the Paycheck Protection Program, this is such a great opportunity for small business, but as you and I were talking earlier today, there's a need for cash flow now. And this, you may not have an answer for this yet, but curious how long it might take for businesses to get that money in hand. And I believe I read there might be the option for an advancement of maybe a small amount of funds that they could get quicker. I think it might have been $10,000 that they could get within a matter of days. I don't know if you could talk to that a little bit.
Right. So first on the paycheck protection, I mean, if that opens up today, people can start applying today, and the systems are meant to be streamlined and rapid, and talking to your banker or starting to look at it now so you're prepared to apply will all be of assistance. But you're right. We don't know how the capacity of these websites and all these other things will work. And so I'm sure there will be a delay. There are disaster loans available through the SBA, and I'm quite sure that those are already in place. So you can look those up, and they have a broad criteria. If you apply for a disaster loan, yes, which is a loan, but if you apply for it, then there is a $10,000 grant that is available immediately. So as soon as your application goes in, and I hope I'm right about all this, but this is the way I understand it. As soon as your application goes in, you can apply for this disaster funding of $10,000. It's meant to be available within 3 days. Even if your loan is rejected, if somehow you don't qualify, you're allowed to keep the original grant. So I would encourage people to look at that if it's something they would find useful. And that is, as far as I know, up and available on the SBA website.
And a question came in regarding the SBA disaster loan application. Some of our members have already applied for that, and they've been given an application number, and they can't, and again, this may be a question, you may not have an answer to this now, but they can't figure out on the website where they could check on loan status. So they've applied, they have an application number, and I think they're kind of wondering next steps or how to follow up. Would that be a phone call into the SBA office?
I don't know the answer to that. We'll see if we can find it out and then get you the information so that people can, hear from us quickly. I don't know. I do know with, it never hurts to call the SBA website or to call SBDC or one of the organizations assisting, or to try your banker. But I do know that, so many of these, entities are overwhelmed and the phone lines aren't working the way they should be because we never built systems for this level of either phone or internet traffic. So I'd like to find you another source just in case you can't get that information right away. So I'll get my team looking at it, and we'll try to get you back the information, and maybe you can put it on we'll put it on our website or yours.
Fantastic. Now here's two questions that we have gotten repeatedly. You may have touched on one or both of these in your remarks, but I don't think it hurts to reiterate this to those that are listening. Some members have already applied for an SBA loan or an economic injury disaster loan prior to the CARES Act passing. And they're curious if they could still apply for the Paycheck Protection Program if they have already applied for an SBA relief loan. I guess the question is, can you apply for multiple relief efforts, or is it you've got to pick one over the other?
The simple answer is yes, you can apply for both. And I think there is some way you can even roll over one of your loans into the forgivable loan to the extent that that is available to you. The cap on each paycheck protection loan, I think, is $10 million. So good chance most people won't hit the individual business cap.
Great. And also, prior to the CARES Act passing, many businesses had already laid off employees. And now the question is, to be able to access Paycheck Protection Program effort, do they need to bring all of their employees back on now? Or can they bring them back on prior to June and still be able to access that forgivable aspect of the loan?
Okay, there is an answer to that. Let's see. So the general answer is you don't have to bring them on today. You can bring them on later, and the 8-week period will start. The forgivable loan for payroll will start whenever your loan is approved, or it can be retroactive if you choose it that way. As I understand, you have until June 30th to apply for this. And so I think, yes, there is a period of time that you don't have to do it today. You can wait and see what happens. And by the way, I did ask my team to text me if something came up. So if you see me looking down, I'm just, so I just want to give you a number. Yes, you can call the SBA to ask any of these questions. The number is 1-800-659-2955. So 800-659-2955. But again, if you don't get through, we'll be looking for an answer as well.
Excellent, thank you. How about any differences between relief efforts for for-profits versus not-for-profits, or are they treated the same way? I know we probably have a lot of C3s that are on this call right now.
Yes. As far as we understand, nonprofits are included, and they're given all the same considerations that a small business. Clearly, many of them are in exactly the same position of having to lay off employees or having no one coming through the door. And many of them are in a position that they'd like to keep doing good work in their community. And if they had their employees and didn't have to depend on income, they would do it. So yes.
Great. And how about 501c6s? So we do have a lot of organizations who are not organized as a C3, but instead a C6. The Chamber of Commerce is actually one of them. And those organizations were excluded from some of the most beneficial provisions of the Paycheck Protection Plan, such as the forgivable aspect of it. Do you know if that might be reconsidered, or if there might be anything Congress is doing to look at those organizations as well?
Yeah, just to kind of give you a sense of how we're looking at this, members of Congress have multiple calls each day to go through every provision of the bill. And it's also a chance for us to ask questions of our committee chairs and the staffers who wrote the bill. And the 501c6 question has come up multiple times. And I understand there's a general agreement that we have to do more to support those organizations. So I think you will see some changes. And if there's any, I know there's a couple of places they're still looking for clarification. So if anything changes about the current rules, we'll let you know. But I know it's a consideration people are looking into in the future.
Great, wonderful, thank you for that. Here's a question. I feel like I might be like bouncing around a little bit, but we'll get through all these questions. The arts community. We have a huge arts community, as you know, in the Portland area, and we have many, many members who fall under the arts and culture community. And they are interested in knowing if they are covered by the CARES Act. And then the follow-up question is, if there are funds that apply to the arts community, will that be managed and dispersed by the Maine Arts Commission?
Very good question. We know the importance of the arts community, and actually I'm the Arts Caucus co-chair. I'm the Democratic chair with a Republican for Congress. So it was one of the provisions in the bill that we advocated for. I think we originally asked for 150 million for the NEA and NEH, and we got 75 million for each into the bill. I think we all understand that many arts organizations and artists themselves are important economic engines, and Portland is certainly a good example of that. We did speak to the chair of the Arts, National Endowment for the Arts a couple of days ago to kind of go over with her. She's still waiting for final approval from the Office of Management and Budget, but a big percentage of that money will go directly to states organizations. And we think there'll be a fair amount of flexibility in how they set up that funding to arts organizations and individual artists. Some of the money will go directly through the NEA, and it will be available to arts organizations that received grants in the last 4 years. So, and many arts organizations receive direct money from the NEA, or they get it from the state's organizations. So there are two ways to access it. I know that they're attempting to make sure that they can allow the money to be used strictly for operating expenses, because traditionally NEA grants are program-based, but most of the money that they've already let out in previous, and say in 2019 funding is for programs that can't be implemented. So we're trying to make sure that that can be converted. But I would also recommend checking their website, the NEA or the National Endowment for the Arts or the National Endowment for the Humanities. A lot of that money flows back into Maine. And I know that they're attempting to put up information on there about private entities that are giving money to individual artists, allowing people to apply for it. I know Creative Portland, Dynamina, to set up a fund that goes directly to artists, so you can both donate to that and you can apply for money there. And I think we'll see more of that going on. So yes, it's an area of focus. Now, all that said, arts organizations, most of them are 501c3, so they can apply for the Paycheck Protection Program. Also, they can apply for, individual artists can apply for that. For instance, if you're an artist, that you can, both pay yourself, pay the cost of keeping your studio, or those kinds of expenses that you have as kind of your own small business. Also, they, for the first time, are eligible for expanded unemployment insurance. So that's another opportunity there for self-employed and unemployed. And let me just, without getting into huge detail about unemployment insurance, but just to say, I think for a lot of businesses, the Paycheck Protection Program will give an opportunity to have some money that comes in the door quickly and allows you to keep on all or most of your employees. But you may also want to look at what your employees are eligible for under unemployment, because under the current system, it's greatly expanded who can qualify for it. There's a work share program, which I understand allows you, if you can't pay all of, but you want to keep paying the benefits, you can keep people under that program. And also because there's a $600 additional during this period of time, it may be the best way to support your employees at no penalty to your own company.
Let's talk a little bit about the expanded unemployment insurance, because I think that's another wonderful resource under the CARES Act. So you just mentioned under expanded unemployment, an employee can get an additional $600 on top of what they would get through the state. Is that correct?
Yes.
And does the $600, does that have anything to do with their own salary? Like, would that number fluctuate, or is it 600 across the board for anybody who applies for expanded unemployment insurance? Okay,
to the best of my understanding, and we are waiting for guidance, and I know everyone in the state of Maine is waiting for guidance, but it is coming. But under the pandemic unemployment assistance, there is an additional $600 that is just a flat $600. And it applies to every individual in every state. And it's meant to make up the difference. Now, Maine itself has a fairly high cap for unemployment insurance. It's somewhat over $400, I think. But in some states like Florida, it's closer to $200. So it was meant to make up the gap in any state to get people, frankly, just closer to a weekly income. So as I understand it, the $600 is just a flat amount of money, and it's designed to get, as much money out of the door to people who are unemployed as quickly as possible. It is for a limited period of time. So for some people have asked me, well, isn't this a disincentive for my employees to come back once we're up and running again? They'll make more money, some of them on this expanded pandemic on unemployment insurance. It's a limited period of time, so it doesn't go on forever. You won't be calling your employees back and they're saying like, no, I'm going to stay on this system for the rest of my life. It's a limited period of time, but it does cover people who may have been previously laid off. It allows for an extension, even if you've already met your first unemployment term. So if you've had to lay off employees earlier, they can go back and qualify for more money. And again, as I understand it, the pandemic unemployment insurance does not reflect back on the employer. As you know, you can change your own status because of your employees drawing unemployment. This won't. This recognizes that once again, we're all in a situation that's basically nobody's fault. Your business didn't fail because you didn't do all the right things, which is impossible anyway. But this is all out of everybody's control, and the goal is to make sure people have money in their pockets, because without money in their pockets, if you're a landlord, they can't pay your rent. If you're a restaurant, they can't even get takeout food. We need to keep people, we got to do our best to keep the economy functioning at any level possible. So that's why it's greatly expanded.
That's great. And this question just came in from one of our listeners. Does the expanded unemployment insurance cover self-employed?
It does. We've yet to see the guidance on that. So I'm not exactly sure what you will have to present, how it will be determined. But as we understand, independent contractors, self-employed, people who get a 1099 every year, people who run their own business, but they're their own employee, gig workers, as they call them, which I don't exactly know what the definition of that is, but that's sort of the broad way of saying, people who work in this strange economy. And as I mentioned earlier, Commissioner Fortman told me we have 100,000 people in Maine who are considered self-employed. And I think, either many of us have been in that situation. We know people in that situation. It's a really common thing in Maine that, you do some landscaping work in the summer, you go fishing, you do a variety of things, and that is your total income. And how that will all be put together, we are really anxious to know. But I'm really glad that there's that expansion, because, if you're self-employed, you're unemployed, and there's nowhere else to turn.
Right. Going back, another question that just came in about the SBA emergency loan. So if somebody has already applied for an SBA emergency loan before the $10,000 grant became available, does that business need to reapply to be able to access the $10,000 grant?
Well, now I'm talking of the best information that I know from my own experience. I'm just looking to see if I have something close. I do not think you have to reapply for the loan, but I do think you have to apply for the grant. And I think the information should be on the website, because those loans kicked in a little bit earlier. Maybe the grant information isn't already up. That's another question I'll make sure I get to you. But in general, I know you're available for that as long as you have submitted an application. So if you haven't submitted an application, you can't go to the grant first. So I think you're in a good position if you've already submitted for that loan. One other thing I'm going to throw in there, just in case it doesn't come up. We have tried to get as much clarification as possible about seasonal businesses. I know there was a lot of emphasis put on in this bill, making sure we covered seasonal businesses, and you can imagine why that's important to the whole delegation in Maine. It was a concern of all of us. We have a lot of businesses that, they start up in May, they start up in April, they go through October. It doesn't make them any less of a business. They're just gearing up. They've already brought on employees, or they're trying to decide what to do. We don't have all the details, but our understanding is that there will be guidelines for that. And yes, they will be covered. And there will be some way to determine, because obviously you don't have a payroll from January. You have to look at what you spent last year, what your payroll would have been. So we're looking forward to getting those guidelines. And we'll let you know as soon as we know.
Great. Now, here's a question we've gotten a lot of, and particularly before the CARES Act passed, but I think this applies to businesses who will not qualify for the forgivable aspect of the CARES Act loan. They're curious They're curious/nervous about taking on additional debt. So there seems to be a lot of loan options out there for businesses. Many businesses won't be able to bring their employees back and be able to get the forgivable aspect of the Paycheck Protection Program. So I guess the question is, what advice would you have for businesses who cannot get the forgivable grant and are nervous about taking on additional debt?
You know, it's probably the most difficult question out there right now because I think there was an attempt in Congress to try to anticipate ways we could get money to small businesses as quickly as possible. And that's the way these programs were designed. But I fully understand that there are businesses who don't want to disappear, but also don't want to take increased debt on. I think it's still worth looking at the disaster assistance loan because you will qualify if you apply, even if it's a relatively small amount for the grant. So you'd be able to get, $10,000 to hold you over there. And that's the first time SBA has had some grants available. So I think that's still worth looking into. The PPP won't apply to everybody, but again, you are allowed to borrow money and not bring back all of your employees. You'll just have a prorated amount of it. So that might be worth looking at. Again, you don't have to do everything, but you'll have a less amount of the loan forgivable, but maybe there's a smaller amount you could apply for. And then, that's just a horrific time. I mean, everyone, I think in small businesses trying to go to their banks, credit card companies they might be using, any vendor that you're using to ask for some forbearance, ask for the bank to stretch things out. Everyone has sort of different circumstances. I know a lot of businesses have tried to be creative. I've seen examples of people, going directly to their customers and saying, hey, we're going to do a quick GoFundMe. Just, if you care about us, can you put some money in the account? Can you buy gift cards ahead? I mean, a lot of those are very small solutions if you're dealing with big loans and big problems and big mortgages. And, more than anything else, I would say during this really complicated time, if you go through everything that's available in the next week and say, here's my situation, nothing works for me. I hope you will get in touch with us and explain it to us so we can be better prepared to figure out what needs to be extended, what needs to be expanded, what other kinds of relief do we have to have in there? Because it's unprecedented in our economy. We're not used to looking for situations that just hand out money, but we do not want to come out of this on the other side and find we've lost our infrastructure, whether it's restaurants, hotels, small manufacturers, not-for-profits. We don't want to see them all gone. So we'll work with you to try to see what can be done in the future. But it's a really good question, and I totally understand people's desire not to load up with debt, not even knowing when will their business open again. So
that's great advice, and I would just stress what you said about talking to your financial institution through this crisis. The Chamber has been really talking to almost daily to our banks and credit unions, to the Maine Bankers Association, the Maine Credit Union League, and they just keep stressing, if you are experiencing financial hardship, which I have to imagine everybody is in some capacity, reach out to your financial institution now. Don't wait until you have to miss a loan payment. Do it now, because the banks and credit unions are working with people, and they might be a great resource as well to talk through what loan might make the best sense for that business. So I think that was really sound advice that you gave. And I'll also add that we are and have been surveying our members, asking about the impact of COVID-19 to their business. And we will add to that questioning, in light of all these relief efforts, what's missing? What else could we do? And I will, of course, relay that to your office, because if there's something else the federal government could do that we've missed, I'm sure that you would do anything that you could to fix that. So I think every day things are changing, and as people unpack the relief efforts, they're like, okay, that's great, but now this over here. So each day we'll bring new opportunities for solutions.
Yeah, and one other thing I'd throw in, just again to reinforce it, they've added money into the accounts for SBDCs, SCORE, Women's Business Development, all those helpful entities. If you don't have a relationship with one of them, they'll be getting information as fast as anybody. This is a good time to establish that. I completely agree about the banks and the credit unions. And one thing we've been told is, you're all people too. You're all like, you've got your own other challenges. But if you have a credit card issue, or if you have a student loan that you can't pay the debt, there is some forbearance in the student loans. We can help you to figure out which ones that are. And we've heard from most institutions like credit cards, get in contact before you're behind, because most of them have provisions, and certainly with student loans, you don't want to go back into that place where you're 2 months overdue and then they say, oh, sorry, you didn't qualify it because you didn't ask up front. I mean, some of that is way too much bureaucracy, but I'm just trying to say, if you have the time, look over all of your finances, and many of them are personal. Lots of people take out home equity loans to finance their businesses. This isn't, it's not strictly your business and your personal life are separated, but I would look for that everywhere you can.
And to some of the organizations you mentioned, like the SBA or SCORE, or all of those great organizations, if anybody is listening who would like to be connected, I know the Congresswoman's office can help. We can help as well. So just please reach out and we can broker those introductions for you. So happy to do that. A couple more questions we got in. One on short-term rental properties. Are there any benefits that will be made available to owners of short-term rentals who have lost bookings due to the pandemic?
Yeah, that's an important question. And I know, there's a lot of conflicting feelings about short-term rentals, but the fact is they become a huge part of the Maine economy in tiny communities. And then in the city of Portland, I know that we've been trying to get clarification, and entities like Airbnb have been trying to get clarification from the SBA about whether or not you qualify for something like one of the forgivable loans. So as soon as we have that information, we'll be looking for it. I do think some of the entities like Airbnb are attempting to give some rebate to their hosts for the lost revenue, but over time you won't be losing rentals that you had in the books. You'll be losing that share of the business, and for a lot of people it's become an important source of their income or an important small business. So as we get more information, we'll be sure and let people know, but it's again yet another big part of the economy we can't ignore.
Right. Here's one that we've heard. I've gotten this question several times, and I don't know, I don't think this has been covered already. The question is, if I'm unable to continue paying my employees full salary or wage, but want to continue paying their health insurance premiums, will I be eligible for the forgivable loans through the PPP?
Okay, so I don't know if you'll be available for the forgivable loans, and that is, and I don't think I can find the information quickly enough to tell you, but it's a very good question to ask. I'm afraid if you don't pay their full paycheck, even paying their benefits will cut back on the amount of the loan that will be refundable. You could still apply for the loan. Some of it would be refundable, but maybe not enough. But I do know, I think that's called work share. And I do know that there's an expansion of that under unemployment. So again, it may be the best situation for your employees to use unemployment while you're trying to, keep your business at least stable in lockdown. And I'm quite sure under work share, you can pay benefits or part of their salary, reduced salaries, and they can collect the balance from unemployment. So we should have more guidance on that soon. It's, I think, variable from state to state, but I'm pretty sure Maine will be covered, and there's some flexibility under the pandemic unemployment assistance. So that would be worth investigating.
Great. And here's an interesting question. I'm not sure if there's going to be an actual answer for this or if it's more up to the individual employer, but I'm going to ask it because it just came through. How would you recommend handling part-time hospitality employees? Keeping them on helps the business, but they don't want to hurt the employee if they would be better off filing for unemployment?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. And I think it will be different in every situation. Because it could be that, it's a good question. I don't know. I think you would be qualified for the PPP because whatever wage you paid them, as long as you kept paying them that, they would be qualified. But you're right, it may be better for the employee. And maybe there's a way to do some of both. I don't know, but it's a really good question. And, that's the truth here in Maine. None of us are, most people's small businesses aren't, they're not one thing or the other. They're not, they're not a simple formula. You've got 10 employees, everybody's got the same salary. Here's your work schedule. Like I said, in the hospitality industry, there's a lot of variability, and we want to make sure everybody is made whole as much as possible. We didn't talk about the agriculture sector, but that's a whole nother area where we're trying to get some clarification that these SBA forgivable loans will apply to small farms. They're small businesses too, and have exactly the same situation. And many of them are really in a challenging position because they got to bring on employees now. They have to, they're seasonal businesses. They're ramping up right now. There is $9 billion that could go to particularly small farms, value-added farms, people who sell at farmers markets, people whose whole market was the restaurant industry, or directly to a school lunch program. So we're trying to get clarification on that, as well as what SBA loans might cover them. But again, really unusual circumstances. You might have no employees now, but you meant to hire 4 in Maine, or you might need to bring out over H-2A workers, the workers who come from foreign countries just for the summer. Are they going to be allowed into the country or not? We're working on all those questions.
Great. Here's an insurance question. So the question is, they've been paying business interruption insurance for many years. They contacted their insurance company about this as a business interruption, the pandemic being a business interruption, and the company denied the claim. So the question is there anything the federal government can do to expand this to include COVID-19 as a business interruption?
I know we've gotten this question before, and completely agree with the company that this should be covered. I think the last opinion we got was that it was not covered, but I will try to clarify that as well, just to see if there's been some more. Sometimes we get a no, and then so many members of Congress come up with the same question that we find a way to get it to yes, working through the federal department. So I will check on that. And if for any reason there's no current way to get it to yes, that would be an important thing to put down in a future piece of legislation, or some way to get around that rule. I guess it's yet another example of how unprecedented this is. I don't mean to be trite, but it's as if we're in a science fiction movie every day, and things you never thought of would happen are happening. And that's certainly true of, things like insurance policies. Whoever would have asked to see if this was covered? What if I'm shut down because of a global pandemic? We just have to make some modifications here.
Right. Thank you for that. Here's a great question that just came in about the fishing industry, and what of these resources and relief efforts might be available to them, or is there something different out there that they can access?
So there is going to be, there is a very specific, I think it's about $500 million, hope I'm right there, that goes directly to the fishing industry. And you can imagine that, we will have a lot of requests in around that. Again, we're still waiting to see exactly how it will be implemented. I think I'm talking to the DMR tomorrow just to kind of get some details about what would work best. So there will be some relief to the fishing industry. We want to be sure there's coverage for particularly like our lobster fishermen who are already challenged by lack of market. We have clammers, we have all kinds of fishermen out there. And then we have a huge aquaculture industry that's also challenged. My understanding is, as well as that, many fishermen are self-employed, independent contractors working on their own. And some of them may find relief either in the Paycheck Protection Program or will qualify for unemployment insurance. And that may be their best option to just keep money coming in the door. Aquaculture industry is much more like small businesses, and they're going to need more of the small business loans. But we're looking at all those and trying to make sure that we get all the details of how they'll be covered. But certainly an important segment in Maine. But while there'll be a relief package, I think all of them should be looking at both unemployment and business relief as well, because they're small businesses.
Right. Thank you for that. And this might be our final question, coming in hot off the press, but a good question. So when it comes to eligibility for the Paycheck Protection Program, is that the financial institution that makes that decision, or is it the SBA?
That is a really good question. I do think the financial institution has some say because, again, we haven't seen exactly the criteria for this loan, but I have heard through some of my colleagues frustration with some banks on some of the earlier programs that didn't seem to be looking at this with enough leeway given the dire circumstances that we're in. It's important to remember that the PPP, that program, is a 100% guaranteed loan. So the risk for banks and credit unions is extremely low. And I think we have a lot of wonderful banks out there and credit unions that care desperately about their customers surviving, their small businesses surviving, and frankly, their businesses have to stay in business too. So I think that we will see general approval, but I think it's a good question. But I think the bank has a lot of the deciding power there. So good time to call your banker now and start talking about it.
And I will say to that, the banks and credit unions have been finding out about this Paycheck Protection Program alongside all of us, and they are quickly trying to get up to speed. I spoke to some of them yesterday and the day prior, and they're figuring out how to administer this as quickly as they can. So like the Congresswoman said, I think applications are available today, probably. And I know it's such a challenging time and people need these resources now. And I know that our financial services sector is doing all that they can to get up to speed, but just be patient. They're like building the plane as it's flying and trying to figure out how to do this. But I know they are all committed to helping small businesses and the people of Maine. We have a really amazing financial services sector. In my prior life, I worked within that sector for a really, really long time. And I know how much they care about the people and the businesses here. So I know we are in very good hands. With that, I think we can wrap up the Q&A. I know that that's not all the questions that we have, but we will follow up with everybody to get more answers. I know the Congresswoman has stated she would get some more answers as well as it comes available. So we'll make sure you all have access to it. It will all also be on our resource page. I know the Congresswoman has one as well. So there's no shortage of places to go to find this information. I want to thank you, Congresswoman Pingree, for your time. This was so helpful. We will continue working closely with your office. And like I said, we're surveying our members, and we'd be happy to share with you and your staff what we're hearing, because there may be a void out there that we haven't identified yet, or there might be a void that develops within the next couple of weeks that we can help address. And with that, I'd love to turn it back over to you and give you the final word.
Okay, well, again, thank you, Quincy, for doing this so much. I really appreciated the chance to hear people's questions, give the best answers I could think up at the moment with the limited information that we have. And as you've said, we're all dedicated to making sure we get all the information to you that we possibly can. Our office number is 774-5019, so feel free to call anytime. I think our website is pingree.house.gov. So we're trying to put up updates and information as quickly as possible. You can sign up for our newsletter, which comes out every Friday, and we just try to give updates around things. If you ever just want to get me directly, my email is just Chellie@pingree.com. So as long as you might know my name, you can get through. But I just feel really privileged that I represent the amazing businesses and the amazing people that we have here in the 1st Congressional District and in the state of Maine. And just to be clear, the whole delegation is working really closely. This is an issue that concerns us all. Almost every letter and every everything we put out there is done by the whole delegation, because this isn't a partisan fight. This is a fight for our survival. And also to say that, you know, our number one priority is making sure you and your family are safe. We didn't talk a lot about the money that's going to hospitals, to testing, to PPEs. We have tried to fund everything possible. It can get really discouraging because our country wasn't well prepared. We don't have enough in the stockpiles. We weren't manufacturing enough here. We don't have enough test kits. We aren't in the position we want to be. But as we all know, everybody's stepping up to the plate. We have great companies in Maine that are trying to make masks and PPEs and face shields. And it's really impressive to see what's going on out there. And I know everybody's devoted to that, but that's the number one thing. We have to make sure people come through this safe and healthy. And the sooner we can, you know, get to the other side of this curve, the sooner we can start putting our lives and our businesses and our families back together. So, you know, I'm just grateful to all of you. I know you've had to make huge sacrifices to close the doors of your businesses or your organizations, and you're dealing with the pain and difficulties of your employees and your families every single day. So we want to be there to help you. I think you've heard today that, you know, everyone's trying to pull together the banks, the federal agencies, the individuals who can be helpful. And again, thank you for, you know, for pointing out to us what falls through the cracks, what isn't working. You know, we want to put this together as fast as we possibly can. And there's a very good chance we'll go back and make corrections or find more funds to support this, depending on how long things last. But please let us know anything you want us to know. And again, thanks for giving me your time. I'm honored to be with all of you, and we want to be there to help in any way we can.
Well, thank you for being an incredible representative for the people of Maine. We know we are in very, very good hands. Again, I want to wish you a happy birthday.
Thank you. I can't imagine anyone I'd rather spend the birthday with than all of you. So to everybody on the phone, and thank you. It's very kind of you to celebrate with me.
That means a lot. Thank you for saying that. And to everybody who's listening, thank you for joining. Your chamber remains extremely committed to helping you through this really difficult time. So please do not hesitate to reach out to any of us on the staff with any further questions you might have. And Congresswoman, we'd love to have you back here. And
we'll know more next time. So we'll have all the information for you next time.
That'd be great. Things are changing by the day. So we'll touch base about maybe having you back here with our group in the next week or so.
Great. Well, thank you so much.
Happy birthday. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.